With all the chatter about Darren Latham's 90s Space Marine Challenge going across Instagram and all the other social media platforms, I thought we'd try something similar but different. So we're going to do a 90s colour scheme on a modern marine and in a more modern style, just to see if it works. In theory, should absolutely do. Obviously the blue, yellow and red are a triad on the colour wheel, so they go together perfectly, but can we make it look modern is the question, with some slightly more modern techniques and styles of doing things rather than just standard edge highlighting or the old 90s style of the very soft gradients all over. So we've got the base that we did last time on the last video, which we'll link below. We've got our Space Marine all base coated in Cantor blue. Now what we're going to do now is just start blocking in some of the highlights with Macragge blue. Now we're going to do this pretty much all over and then work our way up through Teclis blue and into Lothern blue. But with Teclis and Lothern, we'll concentrate a bit more on upper edges so we can simulate a light source onto the marine. Okay, so working up the colours now. We're still pretty much overall. You want a couple of layers of Macragge, and the trick with very smooth paints like this is there is a lot of back and forth when you start feathering and glazing, and there's a lot of glazing to do on this. So you can mix the colours together as well. So if you mix the lighter step with the previous step, you sort of get an in-between colour which you can smooth out the transitions a bit. So this here I believe is pure Teclis blue. We'll start concentrating those highlights a bit more. And here we're starting to feather in the gradients. So you just want a very thin mix of your paint. What you can do is, again, you can use, you do blocking in with standard colours, unmixed colours, and then you use a 50-50 mix of the colours you're trying to blend together, and you glaze that on, and you can smooth things out. But it is very much backwards and forwards. And what we'll do is, if people are interested, we can do a more in-depth look specifically at doing blends like this. So I can just do, say, a Space Marine, because that's the easiest thing to do it on. A Space Marine has lots of interesting shapes that work really, really well with this sort of style of painting. So we're getting the much brighter tones in now, and we're focusing on the sort of upper right, because obviously he's leaping over the pipe, and so the light's coming from sort of upper right, and it's only hitting those areas. You notice I'm using a fairly big brush as well, which is good to get a nice smooth coat of paint on there. You don't have to keep going back to the palette quite as much, because you've got your brushes loaded up with paint. And then glazing over with some of the previous colours gives it a bit more vibrancy as well. You can see the blue sort of starts to, it reduces any chalky look to it. Reads more as a blue that's in sunlight rather than a really washed out faded blue. you can do as well is you can start doing some very slight edge highlights. You don't have to do the whole thing. You can just go around certain parts of the model where there are going to be reflections or where the light's going to be hitting it. Just pop a few in. There doesn't need to be many. You're entirely dependent on the light for this one, rather than just doing everything. I mean, Games Workshop's Heavy Metal style is it's very specifically designed to make sure every part of the model is visible because they're trying to sell a product. It's become a very recognisable style and something a lot of people try to emulate, which is good. But it's always nice to try and do something different and slightly more realistic. So going back over with a few highlights there just to make a few reflections stand out a bit more. So what we'll do is we'll block out everything else in black. There we go. That just gives you a nice idea of what things could look like. Doomball Brown, that's for the leather, and Avalon Sunset for all of the yellow parts, which is the Aquila on the chest and the shoulder pad trim. There we go, all blocks out. So it's not looking too bad. That yellow is far too uniform at the moment. But we'll start blocking some of the other things in first. We'll get the emblems on the shoulder pads done. This is one of the easy build Assault Marines, so the Ultramarine symbols are moulded into the shoulder pads. So that makes it nice and easy for beginners to paint. So we'll block those in Ministratum Grey and we'll work up to white with those. Now, this is one of the crucial parts for making things sort of tie together. Because obviously the paint scheme is a triad, you need the third colour, which is red. Now everything starts to look right. Start with getting a bit more realism in. We'll wash the Avalon Sunset yellow with iodine yellow, and you can do this all over on this part. But what we'll do is we'll start adding some other colours in to darken the yellow where appropriate. So it'd be very much matching up with where the blue starts to get darker as well. So we'll do that with Scrag Brown first. So as the blue gets darker towards the corners of the shoulder pad, we'll start dragging some of the Scrag Brown in on the same areas on the yellow. And same again with Doomball Brown, but just in a slightly more concentrated area. Then we do that on the left-hand side of the Aquila on the chest as well, because obviously the light is hitting mostly the right-hand side. Then we'll do some highlights with Uriel Yellow. Again, make sure you understand where the light is going to hit. So these edges of the shoulder pad, you can pop in some edge highlights as well if you want to. And there's no need to go hugely bright, so Uriel Yellow is fine. You could go up to Dawn Yellow if you wanted to, but I didn't see a need because you're going much darker than you would do normally. We highlight up the Administratum Grey with some Corax White and then up to Ceramite White. So we've got some Scrag Brown here. We'll just highlight all the leather sections. Because of the way leather works, we could go much more realistic on that. But edges of leather get worn, so edge highlighting on leather does kind of work. You can see that was the kind of blending technique that I use, pushing the paint towards where I need it to be. So now we're getting the special brushes out. One of my Raphaels because we're going to do the lenses. So I'm going to paint them black to start with, and then we're going to work up from Mephiston Red up to Trollslayer Orange. Now, I caught most of this on camera, but found that my massive head got in the way because I had to get quite close for this one. So there are little bits missing here and there. So we'll do standard lenses. So you do a gradient from back to front. So start dark, go towards the lighter, so it's at the front, and then a dot of white on the rear section, which we'll see in a moment. Right, get some ceramite white. You can see there just the dot in the corner. I couldn't capture that on camera. I had to get way too close. And then for any of the metal parts, I decided to go with non-metallics for the metal, but you want to do the piping as well. You could use two tones, one for the non-metallics and one for the piping. You can start with Dark Reaper for one of them if you wanted to. That makes a sort of slightly more bluey tone to the greys, but I just did the whole thing in standard sort of Eshin Dawnstone Administratum greys, because you can vary how they all look. You can differentiate the textures by how you highlight them. So again, we're just putting in highlights where the light's going to be hitting and where things are going to be reflecting. Again, if people want something more specific on non-metallics, I can do that, and we can do specific videos for different topics. But we're trying to make this fairly entertaining, so we've covered up quite a bit in this video in terms of techniques that you might want to learn, but trying to work our way around the YouTube algorithm and see what people enjoy, see what they like to watch. Obviously, if this is something you enjoy, give it a like, a thumbs up. There we go. So that's the non-metallics done on the weapons. And there's a little bit of shine on the helmet sort of piping as well. We're going to add some weathering because I do like my weathering. Space Marine is basically a walking tank, so we might as well paint him as such. We're starting with a very dark charcoal grey, and we'll do some chipping all around the edges wherever things are going to catch. So big open spaces generally don't. Edges of armour will get a lot, but we don't want to go too heavy on this. And this will work over the yellow as well, so we'll do a little bit of very subtle chipping on the yellow. There we go. So now, my favourite bit, I'm going to do some oil washes. So you only need two things. You need some thinners. I've got Sansador, which means sans odour, and it's odourless, and some lamp black. And then you want to mix the two together to get a thin consistency wash. Now, the reason I like oils is because they don't rely on you having a steady hand. So when you apply them, they just sort of wick and use capillary action to just drag themselves into the recesses. Now, if you want a sort of cleaner, tighter look, if you like, you can varnish the model first with gloss. But I like the washes to sort of fade very slightly, so I tend not to varnish beforehand, and it's not going to damage the paint at all. You're using such thin and small amounts that it's not going to and it dries so quickly with that much thinner in it that it doesn't damage the acrylics. But if you want to paint over the top of it, you will need to varnish it once it's completely dry. Always leave it for about 24 hours-ish, just in case. So You just want to dab it wherever you want the shade, and it'll wick away into the recesses. And there we go. One modernised Space Marine, which I think works really, really well. Obviously, the colour scheme itself, it's a Dryad. It's going to work. But it only works if you use all three colours. It does tend to look a bit odd if you don't use one of the colours, because they're spot colours. There we go. Actually managed to get a decent photo for once. So thank you ever so much for watching, and please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.